everybody. My name's Freya and I'm a Yoni mapping therapist and holistic sex coach and educator. And I would love to talk to you about why you might not be getting wet. So lubrication is maybe a confronting or delicate topic for some of you, but in my line of work, I get asked all the fucking time, why aren't I lubricating? Why aren't I getting wet? Why aren't I staying wet? How can I make my body respond the way I want it to? And it's a really common thing that people might struggle with. So there's some common reasons why this might be. And you might have a combo of those going on for you. It's tricky, unless I'm working with you to kind of help you actually diagnose that or nail down what it might be. But I'm going to reel off a few of the most sort of obvious ones that might be contributing. And then I also want to chat to you about something called arousal non-concordance, which is a really interesting and little known factor that influences your genital response, things like lubrication. And that might be really helpful for you to know about, just so that you aren't feeling like, what's wrong with me? Am I broken? Why isn't my body responding the way that I think it should or that I would like it to? So we'll get to that in a minute, but basically a few really common things that can impact your ability to lubricate. Dehydration. So that sounds really simple and obvious, and it might not be what's going on for you, but a super basic need for lubrication is that we are hydrated enough and we have enough moisture in the body to go around, because there's a lot of systems in the body that require that moisture and the water. And the sexual function isn't necessarily a priority. So if you're already dehydrated and you don't have as much water in the body as your body would love, then it's probably not going to be prioritizing sex or allocating moisture to you lubricating. It's probably going to be taking care of more urgent survival needs. So water, just, being more hydrated, drinking more water. Also maybe minimizing things that dehydrate you, like caffeine or certain medications like diuretics, and things like that. The next one is hormones. So if you've gone through a recent change in, something like giving birth, you'd hope afterwards that will kind of balance itself back out. But there are other changes with your hormones, such as menopause, that will require a new kind of calibration, and your body will have to find a new balance. You may have to supplement in certain ways to reestablish a healthy hormonal balance and be able to maintain, that ease of lubrication. So hormones can be a big impactor. And it's not always something that's, happening to your body naturally. It might be from a medication as well. So something like a hormonal birth control pill, also IUDs, or any hormonal birth control, anything that impacts your hormones is going to then impact this as well. So kind of thinking about that, whether that might apply to you, and then how you might be able to combat that. And then also just other medications that might be impacting it, things that might sort of suppress arousal, because arousal is my next point that I'm going to talk about. But if you're not able to get as aroused or turned on as you usually would, maybe because you're on antidepressants, or even the pill can really suppress your libido as well. So that can be a bit of a double whammy if you've got a medication that might be suppressing your arousal and also fucking with your hormones. Not ideal. And then arousal is a category as well. So that's an obvious one. If you're not turned on, you're not really necessarily going to be lubricating. You may. I'll get to that with arousal non-concordance, but that could be a factor. If there's issues going on with your partner, or you don't feel super stoked with them at the time, or you don't feel particularly safe or honored or respected or adored, all of these factors come into it, especially as a woman. Those are really essential elements to feeling really turned on and valued and worthy. So there might be something going on with, you know, your arousal levels and how turned on you are. Maybe there's something to do with your partner. Maybe it's something to do with you being in your head a little bit too much, or really self-conscious, or a bit overthinky. So the whole thing around being in your parasympathetic nervous system in order to get fully aroused, which is a whole other topic. I might do a video on that actually. That kind of comes into it here. So if everything else seems perfect, but internally, you know, the context isn't great because you're feeling stressed, or you are not able to be fully present, you're kind of insecure about your body or how you taste or look or smell, like there's all of these things that could be going on within you and your mind that aren't creating the best conditions for arousal. And that might then sort of halt the lubrication in its tracks as well. And so finally, I want to chat about the fact that lubrication isn't the best indication of whether you are actually aroused or turned on. So this thing called arousal non-concordance, which I've been referring to, super important knowledge to have, because it refers to the fact that in women or female-bodied people, there's only a 10% on average, like most females, there's only a 10% overlap between our subjective arousal, so how aroused we're actually feeling, like our experience, and what our genitals are doing. So our genital response, e.g. lubrication, often, like really often, doesn't match our subjective experience of whether we're actually turned on or not. So this works in both ways. It can mean that you are lubricated and you are wet and you're actually not ready to have sex, or you're not that turned on. And you feel like, oh, I mean, often this is where we can kind of go wrong. If we are partnered with a female-bodied person and we're like, oh, she's wet, she's a DTF, let's go. She's ready, or you think about your body, oh, I'm wet, so I guess I'm ready to go. That's a really dangerous assumption to make, because it's not necessarily the case. And arousal non-concordance means that you can be wet and actually not turned on or ready to go. And then on the flip side, it can also mean that you are turned on, but your body's not responding how you expect. So you're aroused, you're turned on, but you're not getting wet. And that could be because of a number of factors that we've just spoken about: health, diet, all of that, stress. But it also just fucking happens sometimes, you know? And so it's tricky, because with male-bodied people, 50% of the time, their genital response matches their subjective arousal experience. So when they got a hard on, it's because they're turned on, like way more of the time. So then we, you know, having this male as default kind of template or blueprint in our society around sexuality, we kind of look to that and we go, oh, well, that happens with like men all the time. You know, an erection usually means that they're turned on, and they go hand in hand. So that must also mean that with women, like wetness must go hand in hand with her being turned on and ready to go. And, you know, the difference being with men that's 50% of the time when they match, and with women it's only 10% of the time when those match up. Like crazy that we don't know about this stuff, and really important to keep in mind, so that you're not beating yourself up and going, what's wrong with me? What are you doing? Like, there's really, really kind of tangible, scientifically explained reasons why sometimes your body's just not going to get wet when you reckon it should, or when you want it to. And that's when lube comes in, and that is you know, sometimes frowned upon or stigmatized, because there is this kind of quite unhelpful misconception going around. It's being spread by some kind of women's empowerment, female sexuality gurus, that if you're not lubricating, you're not ready to have sex. And that's cool as a rule of thumb. It's nice to kind of have a bit of something just to halt you in your tracks before penetration or before having sex, to check in and be like, oh, maybe no, you're not ready, you know, there's no lubrication there. And then you can kind of figure out whether actually you are aroused and you do want to have sex, so you use some lube, or whether more foreplay might be required, or there might be something else at play. But it's a really damaging little catchphrase, like if you're not wet, you're not good to go, because that implies that if you are wet, you are ready to have sex, which is not the case, as I've just explained. So keep all that in mind. Just be on your body's side. It's wise, it's clever, it's doing what it's designed to do, even though that might be a bit confusing because it's not what we expect and we're not taught about this, and because the things we are taught about sexuality and arousal are usually based on male bodies. Bit of a mess, but yeah, just back yourself, keep all of this in mind, get in touch with me if you'd like to know more or if you have any questions, and you can also work with me. I do online coaching and sex education and things like that. So I hope this was helpful and shed some light on a really common challenge that a lot of women have. Yeah, lots of love.